Now you are going to learn about how Matlab stores strings and characters. So these are mostly non-numeric characters like letters and things like that. And in the process, I will also introduce you to cell arrays, and then you will get some introduction into the distinction between using square brackets and using curly brackets. This is one of the confusing features about not just MATLAB in particular, but coding, that there are different kinds of brackets for different functions. So in MATLAB, we have parentheses and square brackets and curly brackets. You've already been exposed to parentheses and square brackets, and here you'll learn more about square brackets and also about curly brackets. Anyway, let's switch right to MATLAB. So what we want to do here is have a variable that codes a letter string. So this is going to be the letter string Mike, and I will call it name. So the variable name is name, and it is storing this information, M-I-K-E. So this is 4 letters here, and we surround them with a single apostrophe like this. So we can copy and paste, and then we see that this is indeed the letter string Mike, M-I-K-E. And if we type whose here, we see there's one variable, name, and it is of size 1 by 4. So it is a 4-element array. It's a vector, and it is of class char, which is character, so char. So a different class from what you've seen previously. So previously you saw a variable, call it v, set it equal to 3. So that was a double precision number, and now we have a character. Now, this line of code here is just to show you that these single quotes are really important. And in fact, it's pretty instructive if we try to run this line of code and see what the error message is. So the error message is unrecognized function or variable Mike. So what's actually happening is that MATLAB thinks that Mike should be a variable or a function. So for example, if I would write Mike equals 3, now I can run this line, but essentially all I'm doing here is reassigning the variable that was 3 to now being name. Okay, but I'm gonna run this line again because I'm gonna want to compare that to something down below. Okay, and here I have another variable. I'm calling it character 4, char 4. And this is the number 4, but it's actually encased in single quotes. So this is actually the string, the character 4, not the numerical quantity of 4. Okay, so that is for characters. And then we have a related variable type, which is strings. Now, strings are actually fairly new in MATLAB. I forget which version exactly they were released in, but if you get an error message when you try to run this line of code, then it's probably just because you have a slightly older version of MATLAB before this type with the double quotation marks was introduced. Okay, so let's run this line of code here. And what I want to do now is type whose and show you the difference between these two variables, name and name s. So name is a 1 by 4, so it's a 4-element vector of characters, and name s is of type string, and it's actually just 1. It's a single element, and that entire element is the word Mike. So that's really the key distinction between a character and a string in MATLAB. Now we can access, so I'm here basically going to highlight the differences between the string and the character Mike. So we can access the second element inside the vector name, this character vector name, and I expect that it's going to give me a result of I. That makes sense, of course, because the second letter in Mike is I. But if we would do the same thing with name s, which is a string, now we get an error message, index exceeds array bounds. So we get this error message because we are trying to access the second element, but this variable actually only has one element. So we can try this again with 1, and that gives us the entire string, Mike, versus if I would say name 1, that's just the letter M. Okay, so might seem a little bit confusing. I have to say, I think I'd almost never actually use this variable type string. I almost always use characters. I find them just a bit easier to work with. They're a little bit more practical in my opinion. So I would say you can just focus on using characters and don't worry too much about strings. Okay, so now I want to introduce the idea of a cell. Now, a cell is a more advanced data type than either a character or a numeric variable, because a cell allows you to hold multiple different kinds of information, so different kinds of variables. You can think of cells like cages in a zoo, so each cage can have its own type of animal. Okay, so cells are indicated using curly brackets. This gets a little bit confusing. These are curly brackets, these are not square brackets. So it's different from this, and that's different from parentheses. So curly brackets indicate strings. So let's see what this thing looks like. So I'm going to copy and paste that down here. Now you can see this is a little bit different. We have the character array Mike, just like what we had earlier, but now it's surrounded by these curly brackets, and Matlab is here calling it a cell array. Okay, so here is one of the great things about cells. You can have different kinds of information contained in a cell array. So let's copy and paste this down here, and now I see that this variable names contains multiple different kinds of information. So it's a character array in the first cell, and it's the number 4 in the second cell. So I can type whose, and this was named, so you can see it is a 2-element cell array. So cells are more flexible than just characters or just strings or just numbers. Okay, so here I just want to show you a little bit more about creating cell arrays. So I'm creating this cell array, I call it celery. So the first element, the first cell, is this vector of numbers, so a numeric vector. The second cell is this string, and then here we have another set of numbers, another vector. And this is basically just to point out that cell arrays can have different types of information, and they can have different sizes of information. So let's see. Copy this and paste, and then we can see what this looks like. So celery, and here you see it's a 3-element vector. Now sometimes, if there's only a little bit of information inside each cell, then Matlab is going to print out the entire contents of the cell. If it's a bit longer, then Matlab will just tell you, about the information that's contained in there without actually showing you the information. Okay, so now, to access individual elements of a cell array, you don't use parentheses like you use with indexing vectors. You use curly brackets like this. So celery 2 is going to give us hello world, because that is the second element in the cell array. And the first element in the cell array was this thing here. Okay, and then I also want to show you, so this is how to access individual parts of a cell array in the command window. We can also look at this in the editor. Sorry, I meant to say the workspace module. So that's this thing here. So here's our variables. Now I can click on celery, this variable celery, and I'm going to double click. And that opens up this new viewer here, and that also shows me all the information. This is, a little bit like an Excel viewer here. So you can see all the information. We can expand this, and eventually, okay, so Matlab still doesn't want to show me the contents, but in fact, I'm just going to double click on this cell, and that opens up even another one. You can see it's telling me where I am here, and that gives me all the information inside this third element of the cell array, which is called variable celery. Okay, so multiple ways to interact with and view variables. The last thing I want to do in this video is discuss a little bit more the distinction between square brackets and curly brackets. This is a little bit confusing. Many people find it a bit confusing, but don't worry, it's going to come with more practice. So square brackets are used for concatenation. So here I'm concatenating the number 3, the sequence 4 through 6, and then this is the letters pi, but that's actually going to be interpreted by Matlab as the geometric quantity pi. All right, so if I run this code, that's going to concatenate all these things into a numeric vector. And here I'm also using square brackets, exactly the same square brackets, except here I'm not concatenating numbers, I'm concatenating character arrays. So this is going to say, hello, my name is Mike, and I like 7 apples. Now here is the thing. If I would just write the number 7, I'm actually mixing different variable types. These are character arrays, and this is a number. So when I run this, when I copy and paste this code down here, it says, hello, my name is Mike, and I like square apples. Actually, I think I would probably be pretty interested in eating a square apple if they exist. But what's actually happening here is Matlab is interpreting this number 7 as the ASCII code for some character. And that ASCII code, whatever is the character for ASCII 7, is not a character that the command window knows how to display. I don't even know what that is. So what we need to do is convert the number 7 into the character 7. Now, we could do that by using single quotes here. That's like what I showed you up here. But there's also a function, and that function is called num2str for string. So this function is going to take as input a number, and it's going to output a string, or in fact it outputs a character array. So now we can run all of this code again, and then we get, hello, my name is Mike, and I like 7 apples for a week. I think 1 apple a day is a pretty solid number of apples. Okay, so that's square brackets. Square brackets are for concatenation. Curly brackets are for cell arrays. So here I'm going to create 2 cell arrays, one containing these numbers and the other one containing these character arrays. So let's see I think I'll just copy and paste both of these down in here. And I'm going to type whos, but now I don't care about seeing all of the variables that we've created in the workspace. I just want to see the 2 cells. So cell 1 and cell 2. So I'm going to write cell and then asterisk or star here, and that's like the wildcard. So that's going to give me information about all the variables that start with cell, and they can be anything else after this. Okay, so cell 1 is a 1x3 cell array. So this is not a vector. This is not the vector 445. It's a cell array where each member, each element of this cell array, each individual cell is its own separate number. So this is different from the vectors that we created a few videos ago. Okay, and likewise for cell 2, we have hello, my name is Mike. So these are all in separate cells because they are separated by spaces over here. So this is a key distinction. Here we are getting a cell array where each one of these is a separate cell. And up here I use square brackets instead of curly brackets, and that doesn't give me separate cells. That concatenates. It puts everything together into one single variable. So I hope you found this video useful and enlightening. I talked about characters and strings and how they differ from numbers. I showed you about accessing and indexing character arrays and cell arrays, and I also introduced you to the difference between square brackets and curly brackets. In the next video, I'm going to introduce you to logical, or sometimes called Boolean, variables. See you soon.